Thank you very much, and thank you to the Shakespeare Authorship Roundtable for very kindly inviting me to talk today. I'm going to talk about John Dee, and I suspect many people know a lot about him already. He was a very learned mathematician, scientist, astronomer, philosopher, alchemist, astrologer, a teacher, a spy, and a communicator with demons and with angels. He was educated at St John's, Cambridge, and later became a Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. He was very well known about the court, not altogether loved and trusted by everyone, though he had his supporters. Lord Burleigh, for instance, was very much on his side, using him as a spy, we think. And the Queen also held him in very high regard, used him to divine good dates to do things on. She called him "my noble intelligencer, most faithful Dee," and "my ubiquitous eyes," again suggesting that he was used as a spy, both in England, because important foreign dignitaries came to see him and find out about his learning and his maths, and also abroad, where he was at courts in Bohemia and Czechoslovakia, etc. And so he was certainly regarded as a spy. He's a very strange man, and he's becoming very, very popular. There's some pop singer, I think, called Ghost Domain, who has had absolutely, I haven't seen the number now, but millions, I mean millions, and 80 million hits with a pop song called John Dee. So he is becoming a subject of enormous interest, and mainly, of course, through his magic and his connection to angels. We have a great number of books that still survive of his taking down conversations with angels. He wrote quite a few books, not many of them, though, were published. I suppose the most famous is this, called Monas Hieroglyphica, first published in 1564. Here's the second edition of it in 1591. And it's all about what you see inside that cosmic egg on the title page, what he would have referred to as the literal signature of the beginning and root of all things, of the universal force of creation from whence all knowledge derives. He called it the Hermetic Seal of London. And this little book goes into every line. There are only 7 lines of it, but he analyzes all the lines, the angles, the points, and he tells us that this contains everything about the creation of the universe. It has the symbols of the alchemical symbols, the symbols of all the planets. It helps to square the circle and show man's relation, therefore, to the divine, the connection of the material world to the divine. And it also goes into the planets and the connection between the planets, the connection in geometrical connection between the moon and the earth, the sun, and also touches upon the septagon, the famous sigil of Amet, which is used by Dee to conjure up angels and demons. He slightly denied that he conjured up demons, but we can go into that later. He wrote 2 remarks which I think are of fundamental importance to understanding the Shakespeare authorship question and unlocking it. He was also, in my view, a very important witness to the Shakespeare authorship question, and I'm going to show also how he got himself involved in it. But let's just look at those 2 remarks. The first one comes from his book Monas Hieroglyphica. "We demonstrate here that the quaternary is concealed within the ternary. O God, pardon me if I have sinned against thee by revealing such a great mystery in my writings, which all may read. But I believe that only those who are truly worthy will understand." What is he saying here? He's saying the quaternary is concealed within the ternary, and then quickly apologizing to God for having sinned by revealing such a great mystery. Well, clearly that great mystery, as far as the ternary is concerned, is about the Trinity, and that's why he's apologizing to God, because he's describing the Trinity, which in Christian terms is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, though I accept that sometimes wisdom, Sophia, or the Word is substituted for one of those. But in the Christian terms, it's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That's what he's talking about, the ternary. What then does he mean by the quaternary? Well, you only have to turn to the front page to see a very nice quaternary that's drawn there in a square, consisting of perhaps the most famous quaternary of them all, the 4 elements: ignis, air, terra, and aqua. That's fire, air, earth and water, believed to be the basis of absolutely everything in the material world, and therefore the representation of the material world. So when D says that the quaternary is concealed within the ternary, what he means is that God is inseparable from his creation, and that the material world, that is to say, everything, the stars, the moon, the sun, the earth, the people, the trees, the mud, the water, everything on it, is part of the Holy Trinity. We, therefore, are in part divine. At least he believes our souls are divine, and that our bodies are connected through this quaternary, through the material world, to God. Something a little bit blasphemous, and he could have got burnt alive, as poor old Giordano Bruno was, for having exactly the same opinion at the same time. You're looking here at a not very high resolution, I'm afraid, image of Dee's cosmography, his picture of what he calls the primi quatridui mysterium, the four main mysteries. What are we looking at there? Well, we're looking at a big triangle, which obviously represents the divine Trinity, and you can see at each of the three corners of that triangle the sacred tetragrammaton, that's the Hebrew name of God, and from there you can see rays going back and forth to the cosmos, and on the outer ring there all the stars of the firmament, and the inner rings representing the planets, including the moon and the sun, and then through that what we see is a ring of fire, and then what looks like the pupil of an eye, we see earth and water. It looks like an eye, I think, very deliberately, and people who get conspiracy theory and slightly obsessed will be alarmed, I suspect, to see the similarity between what you see on the dollar sign, the Eye of Providence. There it is in a triangle. You look closely at that eye and you see the earth and the water in the center, and then the rings of the planets around the outside. Very much taken from the same philosophy as D, which is a Renaissance view. And now we're going to look at a symbol here which represents this quaternary that's concealed within the ternary, and is used very much by modern day Freemasons of the Royal Arch degree, and it comprises three T's formulated like that. So that's why it's called a triple tau, and it's known as the clavis ad thesaurem, which means the key to the treasures. That does not mean the key to some safe or vault with a lot of diamonds and rubies in it. It means the key to knowledge of God, essentially, and man and the universe. And so within this so-called triple tau, you see upside down, hidden in plain sight, a fourth T. That is the quaternary that is concealed within the ternary, and that's why it's a symbol of this. It is represented by the number 19 because it has 19 attributes. That's to say 5 lines, 6 points and 8 angles, which add up to 19. And I'll come back to the relevance of this presently. Just to say that it does connect also to Hermes Trismegistus, who is the great father of not only Dee's philosophy, but the philosophy of the Freemasons and the theology of the Freemasons, insofar as it is a T and an H, the initials of Hermes Trismegistus. It is also considered to represent Templum Hierosolima, which means the Temple of Jerusalem. And if you know about the Freemasons, you know that they are obsessively meditating on the Temple of Jerusalem, but we don't need to go that deep into why they're doing it now. Okay, so the first remark that I wanted you to ponder on by D is this idea of the quaternary concealed within the ternary, the material world being wrapped up within the divine. This is the second remark of D which connects to it, and it's taking the two together that we're going to unlock the Shakespeare mystery. This second remark is drawn from a preface he wrote to Euclid's Elements, published in 1570, in which he says, "May we be led upward by degrees, so informing our rude imagination toward the conceiving of numbers absolutely, that at length we may be able to find the number of our own name gloriously exemplified and registered in the book of Trinity, most blessed and eternal." What does he mean by this? What is meant by the number of our own name that he wants us to find and link to the Trinity? Well, we all have names, and none of us in this present day and age bother much to wonder what the number of our name is. But it mattered enormously to intellectuals, philosophers in the Renaissance, going right back to the Wisdom of Solomon 11:20, when it is said that God created all things according to number. It is the view of such philosophers as John Dee that God created the universe using letters and numbers. They were the first forming part. In the beginning was the Word. And that since the material world is so connected to the Trinity, the Divine Trinity, then our way to get closer to God is by science and discovery and examining everything in the material world and finding its number, and that way we get closer to God. That is at the basis of this rather extraordinary philosophy. So how do we find the number of our name? Well, Dee gives us a clue in his Monas Hieroglyphica. He writes, "There are specific reasons for the shapes of letters, their positions or places within the order of the alphabet, their numerical value, and many other things that must be considered with regards to the primary alphabets of the three languages." Now, what he means by the three languages are distinctly Latin, Hebrew, and ancient Greek. He is only interested in trying to find the number of things and the number of our own names through these three alphabets. He is not interested in the English alphabet, for instance, which includes a W and a J, and V and U are the same letter, for instance. So none of this would work if we use our English alphabet, and we'll come to that. Okay, so what is meant by the number of one's name? If, for instance, you're called Francis Bacon and you want to be really simplistic about it, you can say, okay, the number is 7-5. That's the letter lengths of Francis Bacon. 7 and 5 add up to 12, which is a 1 and a 2. 1 and a 2 come to 3, which gives you Trinity. Oh, yippee! I've managed to align my name to the Trinity. But of course you haven't quite, because the John Dee and Francis Bacon and all that gang knew pretty well there's a quaternary hidden in there. So just doing that won't actually suffice. There are other ways of finding the number of your name. Perhaps the most famous and the most obvious is called gematria, where you take the order of the alphabet, which Dee just said is extremely important, and number each letter accordingly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then look at your name and take the numbers from those letters. So Francis, for instance, is 67, Bacon is 33. Baconians are very aware of this, and in their history have spent a lot of time, a little bit wasted in my opinion, and we'll come to why that is, looking at the first folio and finding 67 and 33 and saying, well, therefore Bacon must be Shakespeare. Actually, Bacon was aware of the Triple Tau and its significance and the connection of it to his name. We have Lord Bacon's Abecedarium, in which he associates the triple tau, that he calls triplex tau, with the number 67, which is the number of Francis. How is he doing that? He's not actually taking the letters 1, 2, 3, otherwise 3 T's, triple tau, would be 57. How does he get to 67? Well, he numbers the Greek alphabet all the way through to 24, that's normal, but instead of just timesing the T, which is 19 by 3, he carries on giving 25, 26, 27 exactly, etc. with double A, double B, or double alpha, double beta, double gamma, all the way through to triple tau, which is 67. That's how he does it and connects himself to this very mysterious symbol. Now, John Dee, perhaps that's even simpler. Don't forget, there's no J in Latin, so it begins with an I, Ion D, and he has the letter lengths 4 and 3, and 4 and 3 make 7. And he was in a magical seance on one occasion with St. Michael, who told him directly that 7 knitteth man's soul and body together, 3 in soul and 4 in body. So you understand what is meant by that. The 3 in soul means the divine trinity. The soul is simply divine and part of the divine trinity, and 4 in body because the body is from the material world and made of the 4 elements. That's what he's talking about. Of course, 7 is interesting to Dee. As many of you will know, he's said to have occasionally signed himself off as 007, and that's part of his being a spy, of course, and part of the Queen calling him my ubiquitous eyes. So you see his 2 eyes there with the 7 going over it. the 7 being the 4 and the 3 of his name, and also symbolizing the connection of himself to God. So there's his number of his name, and also the figure of his name, not just the number here. He signs himself off, dicit litera quarta, and then puts a triangle with a dot after it. That is Seth, the 4th letter. The triangle obviously represents the Trinity, 3, but it is the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet. So you have that concealed quaternary in the triangle. And that 4th letter is delta, which is pronounced D, hence the dot, which is a shirik in Hebrew. So you've got his pronunciation, the 4 and the 3, and the quaternary concealed. Elsewhere, he signs himself just ID, and that too connects the quaternary, the hidden quaternary in the ternary. But I'm not going to go into that now. I might do it in question time if you're interested. Here, in the 2nd edition of his preparatory aphorisms, he signs himself again with a triangle and gives it away what that's all about, because he writes right next to it, quaternarius in ternario conquiescens, meaning that the quaternary rests within the ternary. Okay, now let's have a look at this fellow and see how he resolves the number of his name and connects it to the Trinity. His name is a little bit more complicated than Francis Bacon and John Dee, because it has 3 points of it. The Edward de Vere, which is 624, and also a bit more complicated again because he's also got a title which is Earl of Oxford, but lucky for him that's 426, which is 624 backwards. So 624 seems to be the name of the game, let's say. Now, just as Dee signs himself off with a triangle, which is emblematic of his name and the quaternary concealed within the ternary, done in a shape, well, we get from the Earl of Oxford signing himself off in one of his servants' pamphlets, and the preface to it, yours at an hour's warning, double V. So how does double V connect him in any way, or his name, the number of his name, to God? Well, straight away we can see that 2 V's consists of 6 points, 2 angles, and 4 lines. So that's your 6, 2, 4, and Oxfordians might recognise in the double V Edward de Vere's motto, which is vero nihil verius, nothing truer than Vere, or nothing truer than truth, i.e. nothing truer than Vere in God, since God is truth. Notice how brilliant it is, the 2 V's obviously representing vero and verius, and nihil, which means nothing, being represented by nothing. So vero nihil verius is cleverly summed up in this. And of course, if you push it together, you get what we call a W, but they in the Renaissance, English Renaissance, called a double V. And this connects him to the Trinity, most specifically to Jesus, who says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. There you see the 3 V's there representing that Trinity, or godly Trinity, and then of course the 4th V, which is the upside down V there, representing Vere. So just like you had with Dee, you've got the connection of Vere and his name, Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, connecting it up to a 3-fold, 4-fold Trinity. Hope you're following this. It is a complex idea, but once you get it, it's reasonably simple, I think. Okay, so that shows how he connects with a symbol the number of his name to the Blessed Trinity. But what exactly is the number that he can represent? The way I think he thought this through is to look at this triple tau. I'm speculating here. I've told you that the triple tau can be represented by the number 19 because of its 19 attributes. But if we decide to go down the route of gematria, then we see that the T is 19, just as the tau is 19 in the Greek alphabet. So a triple tau, therefore, is 3 19s. So 3T is 57. But we know there's a complication here because it is also represented as 4 T's because it has that quaternary concealed within it, and 4 19s are 76. So is there any way that Edward de Vere can find the number of his name that is represented both by 76 and by 57. Is that going to be too difficult? Well, very lucky for him, he's called the Earl of Oxford, and if you look at the numbers down below and see O is 14, X is 21, F is 6, etc., etc., you find that Oxford comes to 76. So that's quite lucky, because it means that Oxford equals 40. Now, he is the 17th Earl of Oxford, and 17th Earl of is 17 letters. Again, maybe that's just a little bit lucky, isn't it? 1740, and maybe it's just a little bit lucky that 40 is a pun on the number 40. And if you call yourself 1740 and add 17 and 40 together, it comes to 57. So he's got both the 3T and the 40, the 57 and the 76, the quaternary that is concealed within the ternary in that triple tau, and he's tied it to his name, 17th Earl of Oxford. But also, if you add up the numbers of 1740, that's 1 plus 7 plus 4 plus 0, it comes to 12, and that is the 12 letters of Edward de Vere. So in 1740, he has found the number of his name just as Dee asked him to do, and he has aligned it to the Blessed Trinity, which is a threefold, fourfold Trinity with a quaternary that is concealed within the ternary. How clever is that? Now, what's the point of it, though? How is he going to use this? Well, if we look at his signature, we can tell that it obviously matters a great deal to him. You can see how it's written very precisely and very carefully. There seems to be a great big 10 in the middle and 7 dashes. 10 plus 7, of course, is 17. 4 dots at the top with an M, which means multiplied by 10 is 40. So you've got 1740 hiding right there in his signature. By the way, M multiplicatus did mean multiply in those days. The cross sign that we're used to, the multiplication sign, wasn't actually invented until 1631 by William Orchard. So that's what that M is for, multiplied by 10, which is 40. Now, if you're so keen on 1740 and you're going to give yourself a pseudonym, what do you want to do with your pseudonym but to mirror your number within it? And that is precisely what he does. So if you look at the double V that you can see there, and you see V is 20, so 2 20s are 40, and then you follow it by 17 letters, Ilium Shakespeare, and there you've got a mirror of your 1740 in your pseudonym 4017. And of course more than that, because as we've seen, the double V at the beginning gives you Edward de Vere, the 624 Earl of Oxford, and the Ilium Shakespeare, of course, alludes to Troy, Ilium, where the patron goddess of playwrights shook her spear, enabling Achilles to slay Hector. Of course, I'm talking about Pallas Minerva, who was the goddess of playwrights to the Romans. So how clever is that? In fact, it's completely brilliant. You've got your 4017, you've got Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, and you've got that reference to Pallas Minerva, the patron goddess of playwrights, in Ilium Shakespeare. We actually see a great deal of examples of 1740 playing out, and I'll just show you a few of them because there isn't time. I've put a lot of them onto various videos I've put onto YouTube. This you're looking at the very first time that the name William Shakespeare ever appears in a literary context. It is, of course, the dedication to Venus and Adonis of 1593, and you'll see the whole thing is written in italics except for 2 items. That is to say, the capital R at the top, very much embellished. R is the 17th word of the Roman alphabet. And then, of course, your honours, in all duty, comma, William Shakespeare, dot, which is 40 characters. Now, if I were to take you to 1595 to this work, another example, I won't give you too many examples because I want to get back to John Dee really, but just to show you how prevalent it is. Here's a work called Polymantia, and you can see the 17th full word from the end of the page is Oxford, and that is followed by 40, which is in fact the fourth T, counting from the left along that line. So you've got 1740, which is Oxford. If you were to count the full words from the bottom of the page, including the words in the margin notes, and the 17th word is Shakespeare. You can see there, that's followed by 4x. X in Latin is 10, so 4 tens are 40. And once again, if you count the T's, this time from the right to the left, the fourth T is the one immediately after Shakespeare, the 17th word. So you've got 1740 twice and 1740. Many of you will know this particular allusion, particularly Oxfordians. It is extremely interesting, of course, because you've got court dear verse written underneath there, which is a perfect anagram of our De Vere, a secret, sitting underneath the word Oxford, and a line to the margin note, sweet Shakespeare. But I'm not really interested in talking about that right now. It's about the 1740, which I'm interested to impress upon you. Just another example here. Again, I think this is extremely interesting. This is from 1709, so it shows how long this 1740 business was going on. This is the edition of Nicholas Rowe's edition of Shakespeare, so pretty late. If you look at that, what's written there, it looks like an obvious declaration of Stratfordianism. Mr. William Shakespeare died AD 1616 and in the 53rd year of his age. So hooray, Stratfordianism wins. Well, it doesn't actually. Let's look a bit more carefully at this. Look, for instance, where things are pointing. There's a palm at the top that's pointing to the letter M. M is the 12th letter of the Roman alphabet, and it's pointing straight through the M, in fact, at the 5, which is also being pointed at by the oboe reed. So, in other words, telling us to add the 5 and the 12, which is 17. And then, since adding seems to be what we're doing, there seems to be the word add right in the middle. So we add 16 plus 16, et, which means and, 5 plus 3, add all those numbers together. 16 plus 16 plus 5 plus 3 is 40. If we look at the very top of this bit of writing, we find the R. We've already seen that R is the 17th letter of the alphabet, and that is followed by precisely 40 characters. Look now where that shadow is pointing in the top right. It's coming down, pointing again at that M, which we saw was 12, and then the 5 letters following, 12 plus 5 is 17, and then the double V, as we've seen, V is 20, 2 20s are 40, 1740 again. So we have 1740 3 times on that plinth, and as we all know, where you've got a 3, there's a quaternary that is hidden. We need to find the fourth, 1740. We can probably guess where it's going to come. I show you these 3 triangles. That's actually another emblem of the Royal Arch Freemasons, 3 triangles which make a quaternary, a hidden fourth. And also, of course, the triple tower, which does the same thing. So let us find the fourth, 1740. Probably guess where it's going to be, actually, can't you? If you look up at those 2 wreaths that seem to be being held above this strange flat picture of Shakespeare, then you can see in the middle an X, and then we look down at his collar, which gives a V, 1 1. XV 1 1 in Latin is of course 17, and then we look for the O's. Well, they're in the wreaths. The one down there, 1 2 3, and the 4O then is the picture itself. So you've got your 1740, which is obviously telling us that that figure there is Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, 1740. I'll give you this very quick, fine example because it's not so much about the authorship, but what it tells us about the plays. This is the very, very last speech of Hamlet from the first folio. He says, "Oh, I die, Horatio." Notice down here at the end of it, O dies. So O is obviously Hamlet, because he says I die and O dies. Nobody would say that. It's a very bad line to have written, but we all know why they're doing it, because we've just seen it on the other thing, that 4 O's, of course, is 4O, which is 40. Dies, and it's preceded by the rest is silence, dot, which is, you've guessed it, 17 characters. So 1740 dies. That is telling us that Hamlet, the figure of Hamlet, is based upon Edward de Vere, and as many Oxfordians have pointed out for many, many years, it is a very autobiographical play with literally hundreds of connections through Hamlet to the life and times of Edward de Vere. Okay, let me now get back to John Dee, and I did say at the very beginning that Dee is involved in the Shakespeare authorship cover-up. It's not just that he inspired Edward de Vere to find the number of his name and to align it to the Trinity in that threefold, fourfold way. That Dee is actually involved. And what I want to show you now is how this, the dedication to the Shakespeare sonnets, published in 1609, that was the year that Dee died, how it involves the triple Tau and how that key to the treasures we can use to unlock it, and how Dee himself identifies himself as the person who did all this and made it all. So what's the first thing we can say about this? Well, it's laid out into three triangles. 3 3s are 9, yet if you count the lines, you'll see we've got 12 lines, implying there's 3 too many. Well, again, we're looking at this quaternary that is concealed within the ternary. It would have been simple, you would have thought, just to do 3 triangles of 3 lines each, but that is not the way their minds are working. In fact, if you count the line lengths of those triangles, you see they come to 6, 2, 4, which, as we saw somewhere near the beginning, that is the number of Edward de Vere's name and his title, Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford. It is also June the 24th, 624, and June the 24th was the day upon which Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, died. We can take this 624 numbering even further by counting the words as demarcated by the dots and hyphens in the order 6 to 4, and there we find a rather interesting message. These sonnets all by ever the 4th T. Well, ever is quite clearly a perfect anagram of Vere. It's also E. Vere, if you like, so it's telling us that the sonnets are all by E. Vere, the 4th T. Well, I hope you're beginning to understand already what is meant by 4th T or 4T. If we look for the 4T on this particular dedication, we see it just above the last T there, written 4T. That T, it'll come as no surprise to you, is the 17th T of the dedication. So there we have 1740, that's the encryption of Edward de Vere's name, and it is connected, once again, to the triple Tau, the 3 T's and the quaternary that is concealed within the ternary. Now we can see there is a little bit of obsession with triangles going on and with T's going on here. We've looked at the triple Tau, and I told you it was associated with the number 19 by virtue of its having 5 lines, 6 points and 8 angles. If you were to count the geometric value of T, it is of course 19. And if you were to count the number of T's in this dedication, including that sign-off TT, there are 19. And this brings me, I think, to the most interesting part of what John Dee has done here. Remember, there is a fascination with things coming in threes. It is by virtue of threes that we unlock this mystery, not only through the triple Tau, of course, but through the slogans that were often repeated. Tria sunt omnia, threes are all. Tres testimonium dant, threes give testimony. Omne trinum perfectum est, everything in threes is perfect. So given the fact that we have 3 19s here, all associated with T, which is the triple Tau, which is the key to the treasures, given the fact that John Dee was an absolute obsessive of putting letters into grids. In fact, in just one book alone, he has 49 grids where he wants us to look at the letters both in diagonal form and down through columns, as well, of course, as the famous Enochian tables, that why not put all of the letters of this dedication into a grid of 19 columns? Well, here it is. Can we see anything catching our eye, anything interesting there? Well, straight away, perhaps we see 3 T's, the so-called triple tau. Now, remember, the triple tau is supposed to have a concealed quaternary, a 4th T, probably pointing the wrong way up. Well, that's obviously not the T that you can see at the bottom right there, because that is not a concealed T. That's not concealed within the ternary, is it? If we're looking for the 4th T, it might be somewhere above the word fourth. It might be upside down. In fact, there it obviously is. What does it say inside it? Devere. So that is a very obvious echo of the message we found. These sonnets all by ever the 4th T. There you can see the 4th T with Devere written inside it. If we were to extend the plinth upon which it sits just a fraction, then you would see G at one end. That is how the Freemasons depict God, with a G, the 7th letter, of course. And then you get 40, which, as I told you, is the 17th T in that list. So you've got 1740, that's 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere. And then at the end, the HT, which is the triple tau. If we look above it, we have the letters I, S, and H. Again, very holy words associated with Jesus, and with the triple tau associated with Jesus through the iota, eta, sigma, the first 3 letters of Jesus, and with the triple tau there's the T on top of the H, and it also is said to stand for in signo hoc, in this sign, or in hoc signo, in this sign. What do we have diagonally written across there? D. I believe that's the first of several of his signatures, which I'm about to show you, which is what has persuaded me that D was the genius behind this extraordinary encryption. What else can we find about this 19-column display of the dedication to Shakespeare's sonnets? Well, we see it begins and ends with the letter T, and T is a symbol of Christ, the Tau cross, and we're obsessed by T's, of course. And God is the beginning, the middle, and the end. I think we've seen that Jesus calls himself the Via, the way, the Veritas, the truth, and the Vita, the eternal life. If I'm correct about that, then we should find a T right in the middle that represents the truth, the Veritas. We draw a T right in the centre on the 10th column. You can see quite easily, without being brilliant at crosswords, that it contains the letters of Veritas. So there we have the Via, Veritas, and Vita, beautifully and symbolically laid out, the first one being the journey, the last one being the eternal life, and the truth being always in the middle. We can do better than that, actually, because we can turn that Veritas into a capital I, the I of Iesus. Remember, there's no J in the Latin alphabet, so Iesus, and then we get the message in Iesum, in Jesus, in the capital I. Veritas venit, i.e. in Jesus, the truth comes. So if we look for signs of Jesus, we should be able to find the truth quite easily. I've talked to you about ISH. I've just shown you how that is Jesus. That's in column 9, which is IX, iota chi, the initials of Jesus Christus. So that's a good one. We have another ISH just there in column 7, and another one there which is centered on column 3. Notice those columns which seem to have this sign, 3, 7 and 9, which add up to 19. So again, we seem to be unlocking something using the triple tau. Let's go to the first one in column 3, and something I found a little bit earlier. I won't make you look for it. It looks like the ground plan, doesn't it, of a church complete with its nave, its cross aisles and its cloisters. Where is this church? Well, we only need to anagrammatize the letters within it, and we can find that this particular church is in the Westminster. Indeed, it looks very like St. Peter's Westminster, which we know as Westminster Abbey. Look what John Dee has left behind inside the cloister. Again, I would say this is a very deliberate signature and sign of his brilliance in creating that. So that's column 3. Let's look in the one in column 7. 7, of course, is the number of Christ's forgiveness. If you're asked to repent your sins 7 times, Christ says he'll forgive you. So 7 is the number of Christ's forgiveness. So let's draw the T, the sign of Christ. Anything to do with Christ's forgiveness there? Yes, indeed. Perfect anagram of eleison. Christe eleison means Christ have mercy. And there's more to that in column 7 to do with forgiveness, because if we draw the cross of St. Peter, who's the patron saint of forgiven sinners, that's the upside down cross, known as the Petrine cross, we see within it isle and south, using a Y as a TH, a thorn. So you have St. Peter's South Cross Isle. Well, St. Peter's Westminster is, of course, Westminster Abbey, and the South Cross Isle is what we now know as Poets' Corner. So we're being led there for some reason, and we're being told that the truth in Jesum Veritas venit, in the capital I. So column 9, which, as I say, is the initials of Jesus Christus with that ISH in it. If we draw our capital I for Jesus 3 times, what message do we get there? Well, we can see at the bottom, De Vere. We've already been dealing with that. And if you read from the top to the bottom, lies here. If I take EDV from the bottom to represent Edward de Vere, and then we have lies here, very simply written there. So we're being told that Edward de Vere is buried in the South Cross Isle at St. Peter's, Westminster. That's Westminster Abbey. Now we're going to turn to find out the exact spot where he lies. So let's put all those back together in the 3 triangles where we found them and turn the page to the title page, Shakespeare's Sonnets. 19 letters again. Now, it was Alan Green who discovered a great mystery that was hidden here regarding this line, which points from the dot by G, which stands for God, and the dot by D, which perhaps stands for Deus, God. And he discovered that joining the 2 ends of this line to various points and line ends on the right, you get something very extraordinary. One right-angled triangle, another right-angled triangle, another one, and another one. There are 4 perfect right-angled triangles there. And, of course, the angles of a triangle are 180, so 4 triangles are 720. And, yes, guess what? That is the same as the angles 720 on the triple tau, which has, of course, 4 T's in it. Triangle, 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 triangle. So there is a connection to the triple tau and 4 triangles. Alan Green discovered also, using Thales' theorem, that these 4 triangles are concealing a perfect circle. What he didn't note, and to which I've added, I think, an important addition to this, is that one can use this geometry and cut across from that G dot to make a cross in the middle, and coming down from the stem of the P of Shakespeare's, we form the Chi Rho symbol, that ancient symbol of Christ, which maybe totally coincidentally consists of the Rho, which is the 17th letter of the Greek alphabet, and the Chi, which in biblical gematria is the number 40. So you actually have 1740 right out there hidden on the front title page. This has been drawn with such extraordinary accuracy. Note how the stem of the P goes down, passing just to the right of the N of sonnets, between the N and the E. That signifies just a few degrees northeast, and we're going to see why that's important in just a second. But then it comes down and passes through the very centre of that circle, with the centre of that cross, and then it goes a little bit lower and it passes just to the right of the stem of the capital D, just there, giving us the initials ID in a triangle. Again, I'm pretty sure that is our clever clogs John Dee signing himself off right there. And then, of course, it lands on a dot just by the letters 14. Now, G is God, as we know, and Christ is truth, ego sum veritas. So let's see what truth we can find by looking where this Chi Rho symbol is pointing. Looking first at the cross. We have bottom left by G, that's by God, and top right de, and VE on top left, and RE. So we've got Shakespeare's sonnets by God and De Vere again. And of course, there is a 5th point which is captioned by 4T, and yes, there are 17 letters in that line. It's 1740, and yes, that T is the fourth T on this page. So I think that is going to tell us where Edward de Vere is buried within the south cross aisle of St. Peter's, Westminster. If I were to get up a map of St. Peter's, Westminster, the south cross aisle there on the right, and compare it, one very interesting thing is these columns don't actually go totally due north. They're about 4 degrees northeast, which is why I said it was very clever that that line was passing through sonnets in that particular way. So what we're going to do is put the centre of the compass in the centre of those pillars and centre it to the centre of the outer pillars, draw a circle, and then move the whole of this over it so that you see where that 4T dot actually lands, and that should be where Edward de Vere is buried, in the South Cross aisle. There's the exact spot. I'll try and magnify it up for you, turn it around, I don't know if you can see that, but it lands, hokey cokey, it lands on the Shakespeare Monument in Westminster Abbey, which was placed there, yes, you've guessed it, in 1740. And if we look at the scroll to which he's pointed, you can see that he's muddled up the Shakespeare quotation by putting the cloud cup towers on the top and taking the E out of it, so it has 17 letters. It shouldn't be there, it should be lower down, that particular line, and lining it up like a Masonic square with 4 T's on the left. Reminding us all, does it not, of the Stratford-upon-Avon monument, which has your 17 characters and 4 T's like a Masonic square in the bottom right, obviously made to complement each other, I suppose. We also see, if we look at the monument as it originally was when it was first done, it had 17 iron railings, 17 spears facing on the front, and you can see how he's standing, still standing like that to this day, representing the 4 and the X, 4 tens, of course, which is 1740. Then, if we could see him from behind, which we can't because of that wall, so I can flip him round, you see how his position becomes the chi rho, which, as I have said, is the rho being the 17th letter, and biblical gematria, the chi being 40. So there you have your 3 plus 1, 1740, on the very monument that sits right on top of where Edward de Vere is buried, and it's using this 1740, which connects the number of Edward de Vere's name, Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, with the threefold, fourfold Trinity, which is exactly what John Dee asked to be done in 1570. Now, this is my last slide, and I think is the one that really shows the absolutely incalculable genius of John Dee and what he has done here. Just to remind, we saw how double V is used to represent the number of Edward de Vere's name, the 624, and how it also alludes to his motto, vero nihil verius, nothing truer than Vere and nothing truer than truth, i.e. nothing truer than Vere in God. We saw that. We also saw how the capital G is used by the Freemasons, the 7th letter, to mean a God. And I think I've really drilled into you by now this idea of the triple tau with the quaternary that is concealed within the ternary, and also the 3 triangles which put together in such a way form the quaternary, another triangle pointing the other direction. So given that we have our 3 triangles on the right in the dedication, and given all that I've shown you about the quaternary, it is obvious, is it not, to us by this stage, that there should be a 4th triangle hidden in the centre representing veritas, which is truth, the first one representing via, which is the way, and the last triangle representing the eternal life. So can we find the veritas, can we find the truth, an upside down triangle hidden here in the very centre? Well, obviously it is going to be formed of an anagram of what it says there, our ever living poet wisheth. And this is what I found. So it now reads and makes perfect sense: to the only begetter of these ensuing sonnets, Mr. W.H., all happiness, and that eternity promised by God, double V, the poet, vero nihil verius, the well-wishing adventurer in setting forth. You see then how we have the via, the veritas, and the vita, all symbolized in those three triangles. Once we have turned the key, the clavis ad thesaurem, the key to the treasures, once we used that triple tau and John Dee's extraordinary words of wisdom about hiding one's name. But look what happens when you turn it upside down. There, I think, we find the grail, the chalice, the funerary urn, if you like. It doesn't matter. That's what is left of Edward de Vere, are the sonnets when turned upside down to form that beautiful image. That is why I say that this absolutely sensational encryption is not just a tribute to Edward de Vere as the one who owned the name of William Shakespeare in 1740, but I think it is a tribute to the absolute mathematical, puzzling, mysterious genius of this fellow, John Dee, and he must be honoured for this work. I think that's all I want to say right now, and I'd be more than happy to stick around and answer any questions that anyone might have.